It was a typical Michigan winter day. You know, ground was covered with snow. We had just started an afternoon shift about 3 p.m. and we were just a couple of minutes in when we got the call from Central Dispatch.
Hi, this is a concerned citizen. There's a man laying down here in the ditch on 60th Street and 16th. It looks like he got hit.
When we arrived, we could see the body in the ditch. The victim was a white male, thin guy. That he had been stabbed in the skull, in the body multiple times.
During the course of the investigation with all the police vehicles parked, one of the neighbors noticed this commotion and he identified his son as the person in the ditch. And he was identified as Christopher Green.
This case was unusual in this area in that we didn't have a lot of murders. And even when we did, usually there was some other criminal activity that this was tied to.
That's what was really strange about the crime, that Christopher was the homicide victim. He was a quiet kid, and his family was a quiet family, good people.
At the crime scene, police find Christopher's glasses in the roadway, a few feet away from his body.
It became clear that this began on the roadway and then continued to where the body was found in the ditch.
The footwear belonged to a larger person. It appeared to be a tennis shoe of some sort. They were able to follow the footwear impressions for quite a distance, but eventually, due to the vehicle traffic, tracks were lost.
In the brush, near where the footprints disappear, police recover what appears to be the murder weapon.
There was a knife, right? The blade is still at the scene, but the handle's gone. We could see the blood on the knife. It's critical to collect all of the blood that you see. You don't know if this is victims, suspects.
Meanwhile, back at Christopher's home, his family provides detectives with a possible lead.
So Christopher, in the summer of 2002, he was working at a blueberry farm and had met Lisa Cousins. She lived down the street from us. They started dating. I don't know that it was anything serious, but for whatever reason, Lisa's dad, Floyd, did not like Christopher.
Investigators take a look at his shoes. None of the shoes that he owned matched the tread marks that were found at the scene of Christopher Green's murder.
Floyd Cousins will remain on the investigators' radar. In the meantime, his daughter Lisa mentions something that sparks their interest.
Lisa detailed an incident that had happened relatively close in time to the murder, where there was an argument with Christopher and a person named Ray Berry. This was about 2 weeks before this murder occurred. The argument started when Christopher said something that Lisa took issue with. And Ray, who had had a romantic interest in Lisa Cousins, seeing himself as the knight in shining armor, sort of stepped in. At that point, law enforcement, once they identified that Ray Berry was a person of interest, did some digging into his background. It was discovered that Ray Berry already had an active warrant out for his arrest for destruction of property.
Detectives put the word out on the street.
Ray Berry was found to be riding around by troopers on a traffic stop.
They asked him about his shoes to potentially compare to the prints found at the crime scene. Ray indicated that the shoes he was wearing were the only shoes that he owned. And they didn't match up to any impressions that were found at the crime scene. Another thing about the interview with Ray Berry is that the alibi he gave was unverifiable. He said that he was at home, but no one was around. Certainly, this evidence is starting to point more strongly towards Ray Berry. However, there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime scene.
Police arrest Berry for the property destruction charges. And in the days that follow, results from the blood on the murder weapon come in.
As it turned out, All of it was the victims. None of it was the suspects.
The autopsy report is also released.
It was determined that Christopher Green actually died of blunt force trauma. Eventually, the knife broke, so it was believed the suspect found a nearby tree limb and used that to brutally beat the victim to death.
The problem was still that even though there were two good suspects in Floyd Cousins and Ray Berry, police had not found enough concrete evidence at that point to seek charges for the murder of Christopher Green.
A year after Christopher Green's murder, the case of the body in a snowbank starts to chill in the icy winds off Lake Michigan, and the case goes cold.
When a Michigan State Police cold case team got involved later on in this investigation, they're now looking for technology, and that was not available in 2002. Also, they're looking for people who maybe follow-up interviews.
Detectives notice something odd in Ray Berry's files.
Reports indicated that Ray received a new pair of New Balance tennis shoes from his father a few days prior to the homicide.
It was later learned through a family member of Ray's that the day of the murder, Ray had lost the shoes. It was important to compare the tread mark patterns found at the scene with New Balance shoes.
The footwear was identified as being a New Balance shoe.
It was a vital piece of evidence that the shoe marks found at the scene were linked to different tread patterns for New Balance shoes. And then on the other end of this, Ray Berry owns a pair of New Balance shoes. Is it a complete smoking gun? No. Investigators were still looking for something to really solidify that he was their suspect.
I was contacted by a subject about the Chris Green homicide. He said he had information that he knew would solve this case.
The informant's name is Claude Taylor. He is Ray Berry's half-brother.
Claude Taylor had gotten into some trouble for some breaking and entering cases, and he was looking to get some leniency on the case in exchange for his testimony. He told us how Ray Berry showed up that evening of the homicide and was acting real nervous.
Claude said that he had been watching the news and that there was a body discovered in Bangor. Ray, when he came over, indicated that the victim was Christopher Green, and then Ray went one step further and advised that he had been involved in the murder.
Detective Conklin tells Ray's half-brother that he'll agree to a plea deal on one condition.
I then discussed the ability to put a wire on the witness. Claude came up with the idea to fabricate a story that somebody was talking on the street about Ray Berry and Chris.
So I asked him, I said, so what's his other one? He said, that's the brutal murder and that thing that happened in... I don't want to talk about no brutal, you know what I'm saying? It was brutal. Why was it brutal? What happened? Northwest Bank. Please don't kill me. Don't kill me.
I remember looking at my partner and saying, did he say what I think he said? We knew we had it. We got the admission that we were looking for.
Following the wiretap operation, Ray Berry is charged with first-degree murder. He pleads not guilty, and the case goes to trial.
The jury found Ray Berry guilty of premeditated first-degree murder.
The judge gave him life without the possibility of parole. I definitely sit there and reflect quite often about what would life be like if Christopher was here.
I would say to the family, I wish we could have done it sooner, and thank you for being patient with us.